Hi everyone, my name is Cassandra and this is my ethnography. So just to jump into it, we can go to my story. My journey to teaching. Growing up, I had a lot of great teachers who truly influenced not only my academic journey, but life journey as well. As an educator, I want to have that same influence and care for my students. And so a teacher who really helped me kind of find my way in life was my math teacher, Mr. Matthews, and I still keep in contact with him today, just because he was a really big influence in my life. And then on to my favorite music. I like R&B and neo soul. And then a fun fact is that I recently attended Janae Aiko's Magic Hour tour, so that was very fun. And then just a little bit more about me is that I am a dog person and I do adore cats, but unfortunately I am allergic to them. And then I love artsy and outdoors activities such as hiking and tennis. Usually, like for art, I will go ahead and paint in the park or just paint on the grass outside my apartment. And so I very much like being outdoors. And then another fact is that I am a first generation college student and I graduated with my bachelor's in history and political science from Vanguard this past spring. And then a motto of mine, which is cliche, but the motto is everything happens for a reason. And then the dogs that you see on the left side of this screen, those are all of my childhood dogs, except for the white one. He is a newer dog. So I will go through them. So the one on the top left is going to be Junior, and he is just kind of like the protector. And then the one on the right, who is white, that is Mellow. And he is about 1.5 right now. And he's just the most energetic dog ever. He is so adorable. And then on the bottom left, that is going to be Pitts. He is just a sweetie pie. And then the bottom right is going to be Chula. And she is the mom of Pitts. So moving on to what does my name mean? So Cassandra, the definition was she who entangles men or the one who shines or excels over a man. And so this is Greek origin. So the name Cassandra is found in Greek mythology. She was a princess of Troy, blessed with the gift of prophecy by the god Apollo, but he later cursed her because she rejected him. And so the curse was that her prophecies would never be believed. And then since her prophecies would never be believed, that is why they assumed that the city of Troy fell because nobody believed her. And then as for like my parents' decision as to why they named me this, so my mom chose a name that starts with K to match hers. Her name is Catherine. And then another decision in that was that the name Cassandra paired well with my middle name, which is Lorraine. I share my middle name with my mom and my grandmother. And then here is my family tree. And so these on the top are my grandparents, Peter Martinez II, Mina Martinez, and then John Ramirez and Carol Rosa. And then below are all of their children. And you can see my parents kind of in the middle of the screen, Catherine Ramirez and Peter Martinez III. And then my parents had my sister, Teresa Martinez. And then they had me, Cassandra Martinez. So I am the youngest. And then moving on to the similarities and differences between generations. And so for my generation, I had a really big desire to reconnect with my ethnic roots. And so one thing that I mentioned in the middle of the similarities is that we had a loss of cultural language. We do not speak Spanish, my parents and I, just due to American assimilation. And I'll get into that a little bit more later on during my oral history. And then something else about my generation was that I am a first generation college student, whereas my parents didn't have the opportunity to pursue higher education. And then something else was that I have a general technology understanding, whereas my parents are not tech savvy at all. And then one thing that my parents really wanted was just they had a desire for their children to have a better life than theirs. And they were so proud when I had graduated college, and I'm happy to say that they did give us a better life than they had. And then some other stuff that we share is just embracing Chicano culture, collectivism, and we are family oriented. And then with my studies in history, my parents really got into Chicano and Hispanic history. And so I would always send them my papers on what I would kind of be writing about, just because that was a very special interest of mine, was going into the history of Chicanos and Hispanics. And then an oral history, I'm going to be talking about my mom's father, John Ramirez. So he was born in 1948, and he was raised in Canoga Park, and he was the oldest of 6 kids. So my grandfather had a poor childhood where he and his siblings had to work the fields picking vegetables such as onions and potatoes. And in school, John and his siblings were punished for speaking Spanish, forcing them to assimilate to English only. So this is what I mean by we lost our cultural language, and it's because we had to assimilate to English. And so that was primarily because, the schools just kind of forced it upon them. And then as for my dad's side, my grandparents just decided to use Spanish just so that they could speak without the kids knowing what they were saying. And so we did lose it on both sides for the last 2 generations. And then something else about my grandfather, John, he would get into trouble often as a teenager and kid. And so this led to his military enlistment in 1967. And at that time, he was only 19 years old. And then the photo of him on the right is just a photo of his military photo. And then just to continue with the oral history, John's first tour was in Korea, patrolling the DMZ. And then John would enlist a second time in 1968 in hopes that his younger brother Eduardo would not be drafted. So for a total, John did 2 tours. And then unfortunately, Eduardo would be drafted in 1969, and he would unfortunately die in combat on November 12th, 1970. So the 2 brothers, John and Eduardo, would never see each other again after John's enlistment in 1968. And that is because John was discharged in October 1969, whereas Eduardo was leaving around that time for his first tour. And so unfortunately, they never got to see each other again after John's enlistment, and this really affected John for the rest of his life as he experienced a lot of survivor's guilt. And so excluding physical unwellness, due to John's service in the military, he suffered from survivor's guilt, PTSD, substance abuse, and panic disorder with agoraphobia. And all of those come with their own little side effects as well. And so to end with this, despite all of this, John is remembered as an amazing man by his family. His humor, immense strength in times of adversity, and love for his family is truly cherished by us all. The photo that you see on the right is a photo of my grandfather, John Ramirez, in the airport for departure to Vietnam in 1968. And then a history of Mexican people in the U.S. And so I kind of did an overview of everything. And so there was the Mexican-American War, just over territory and where the kind of country line is. And then there was the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, resulting in Mexico's cession of 55% of their territory. They gave up a lot of land to the U.S. And then, so then there was the 1910 Mexican Revolution, which really affected the U.S. because a lot of northern migration was happening during that time, just because there was so much going on in Mexico, and that people needed to flee for safety. And then there was the repatriation program where people, where Hispanics in the U.S. were being sent back to Mexico. And sometimes these Hispanics being sent back were even citizens of the U.S. And some of them were illegal, but it really was a damaging program for Hispanics and was just very racially motivated. And then there was the Bracero program in 1943, and it ended in 1964. This was a program where the U.S. and Mexico had a deal where Mexicans could go over to the U.S. and work. But the Bracero program had a lot of issues. For example, it really exploited Hispanic workers. They got paid significantly less than other workers in the U.S. And then moving on, there is the Chicano movement and activism. And so there is the Mendez versus Westminster case, which deals with segregation and inequality within schools of Hispanic people. And then there is Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers in 1962. And then there is also the 1968 East LA blowouts. This was activism by students in the East Los Angeles high schools, just fighting for the right to be treated equal. And then there was the war on drugs between the U.S. and Mexico, which led to a lot of mass incarceration of Black and brown people. And then later on, there was Obama and DACA. DACA gave a lot of Hispanics the ability to live in the U.S. And be legally recognized without any punishment. And this was usually for kids who were brought over here at a young age, and so they really didn't have a choice to be here or not. And then as for my family settlement in the U.S., my family has been in the United States for quite some time now, and I am the fourth generation on my father's side. And due to my family's extensive time in the U.S., not much is known about our settlement or if there was ever a settlement. So what I mean by that is, for example, my mom's side, my great-grandfather is full Yaqui native. And so what I mean, it's just we could have been here way beyond when the U.S. had gained this land. And then as for kind of like how my family made the U.S. their home, my family has been here for so long now. And we don't know everything about our settlement just because questions were not asked before family members had passed, or just things not being spoken about. But we did, make a settlement in other ways. And so my family has a history of agricultural workers on both my maternal and paternal sides. And so as I mentioned earlier, my mom's dad, he worked in the field as a kid. My grandmother, her dad worked in the fields as well. And so we've always had that agricultural background. And then my family does have a history of military service in the U.S. And so, as I mentioned, my grandfather, John, my mom's dad, he served in Vietnam. And then before that, his father served in World War II, and so did an uncle. And so we've always had a family history in military service. And then I would say that one way that our family is kind of making the U.S. a better place, I feel like while being in college, I have been trying to raise awareness for Chicano societal issues and also uplifting Chicano stories and voices. And so just to go into that a little bit, I have a fascination with learning the history of Chicanos in the U.S. And so, for example, my grandfather, I did a paper on him and how the Vietnam War had a really big effect on Chicanos in the U.S. and how we were not treated fairly during that time. And then I've written on Mendez versus Westminster. I've written on the 1968 East LA blowouts. And so I am always kind of looking at what stories I can kind of tell to others. And that is primarily because while I was in high school, I did not learn about Chicano history. They may have like passed over Cesar Chavez a little bit, but nothing was in depth. And so much of what I know about Chicano history is through college. And so I think that's one of my main goals as a future teacher is just to teach cultural and ethnic history, because I wish I would have learned that sooner. And then cultural value to the U.S. And so the U.S. is heavily influenced by Mexican culture due to the long history between the neighboring countries, as well as the large population of Mexican immigrants. And so just some examples of this is food. Mexican food is the second most popular cuisine within the U.S. based on Google Trends. For architecture, there are several architecture styles in the U.S. influenced by Mexican culture, such as adobe structures, Spanish colonial, and more. I feel like when you drive down a street, there is at least one house that you see that has an influence of Mexican culture. And then music. Latin music is the fastest growing genre in the U.S. with Música Mexicana as the leading attribute to it. And so somebody who really contributes to this is going to be like Peso Pluma, Bad Bunny, and so Latin music has definitely been growing. And then language. Spanish is the second most common language in the U.S., even among non-Hispanic households. And then customs. Sharing our customs enrich the melting pot that is the U.S. and opens the door to tolerance. And so examples of like some customs that are usually popular in the U.S. are like Dia de los Muertos or Cinco de Mayo. And so, for example, this is my ofrenda on the right side. And so I have a photo of my grandfather there as well as my dog. And I put marigolds out as well as some food for them and some water, and I decorated. And so I definitely love having this up during that time. And then celebrating biculturalism. So how is being bicultural a strength for me and my future? And so I came up with relatability, tolerance, and celebration. So I have the ability to relate with student experiences, therefore creating a safe space for students to voice any concerns or questions. And then tolerance. By fostering a classroom culture of tolerance and kindness through everyday demonstration and behavior, it just makes everything much more open to students and kind. And then celebration. So I plan to have the acknowledgement of diversity and reflecting that within students' education by teaching them ethnic and cultural histories, which is what I mentioned earlier as one of my main goals for when I am a teacher. And then a better place. So how are we leading the U.S. to a better place? So as a future educator, I have the important responsibility of guiding the next generation of kids into adulthood. By leading with love and wisdom, I will teach students of their limitless capabilities, the significance of tolerance and kindness, and the importance of collaboration in everyday life. As a future educator, I have the blessing to help children around me in not only their academics, but personal life as well. I plan to be the teacher students can count on and will do so happily. So this is the end of my slides. Thank you guys so much for listening, and I will see you all soon. Okay, bye.